The only people for me are the mad ones.
The world is filled with the boring and the barely conscious.
And misery loves company.
But we don't have to live this way.
Jessica and I are here to talk to those the system rejects, to radicals and thought criminals.
The ones who never yawn or say a commonplace thing, but push the boundaries of acceptable discourse.
Those who stare reality in the face and dare it to be different.
History isn't made by the timid, and fun is not had by the perpetually afraid.
We are the mad ones.
So let's get to it.
Welcome to the Mad Ones. I'm a grown-ass man who had swimmer's ear in both ears for 2 weeks, and now I'm finishing up a round of antibiotics and feel much better. Host Cam Harless. And with me, as always, is your just started her own ear infection today hostess, Miss Jessica Green.
Yeah.
How you doing?
Well, to be fair, I'm shitty. Thanks for asking. To be fair, it's an old ear infection. I had it a couple of weeks ago, and the doctor, he told me I had an ear infection, and I said, "What are you talking about? I'm almost 40." He goes, "Yeah, you still have ears." I'm like, that's a good point. That's a good one, Doc.
Well, what I thought was cool was in our last episode with Kim, you talked about your story about the beef jerky with Righteous Felon. And they liked it so much that they sent us a box, both of us, a box of beef jerky, and gave us a promo code to give people so they can get 10% off. If they go to righteousfelon.com, they can get 10% off their entire order for the whole website. Mad Ones is the thing. But I thought it would be funny because I got the Voodoo chili. My wife said Voodoo Child. I don't know
It's
if that's
Voodoo Child. Yeah, she's right.
I don't understand that. So it lost on me.
It's like from Louisiana. I don't know.
Okay. I don't know.
She's right, though.
It's spelled the same thing as Chile, the country.
It's child.
But this one has Carolina Reaper in it. And I thought it would be really funny because I'm apparently masochist to get the Carolina Reaper beef jerky and eat it at the beginning of the show. And you can watch if I die. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome.
I'm not going to help you in any way.
Well, I don't think you could.
I'm not going to be able to help you in any way. Not that I wouldn't help you.
But before I do that, I did want to introduce our guest. It's a returning guest, one of our favorites. Joining us tonight's one of our, as I just said, favorite returning guests, a personal friend and a friend of the show, a musician, a dirty leftoid, a podcast host, a father, a colonizer, a punk, and the perfect mixture of toxic masculinity and toxic femininity. And that is both terrifying and exhilarating. Mr. Nick Pecone of the Misfit Family. How you doing, Nick?
Hello. So, in perfect Nick Pecone fashion, I have to start the show out by correcting some things. So Voodoo Child is actually a reference to a song
by Jimi Hendrix.
By Jimi Hendrix, and possibly, if you're from Texas, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Stevie Ray Vaughan's version actually might be more famous at this point in time.
Well, the cow looks like Jimi Hendrix, so that was my
good.
That was my guess.
All of the characters on the Righteous Felon beef jerkies are people based off of people who have been famous prisoners. So this one, it's a dill flavored one. It's Nelson Mandela. And so it makes sense that it would be like a Jimi Hendrix thing.
So we've got one child molester, two child molesters. What are the other bags?
Let's see.
Maryland Monroe.
Ancho Vila. I don't have the whole box
hot shit
on me.
This hot shit right now, and let's see if I die.
I want to see if you cry at the very least.
I hope so.
If it doesn't cause you a little bit of pain, I'm going to be disappointed.
Not
because I want you to be in pain, but it's a Carolina Reaper. It should cause you a little bit of pain.
Okay, so I shouldn't.
This is how you
talk with my mouth full. I'll tell that in a second.
This is how you get closer. This is how you ascend. It's going to be great for our audio listeners.
I'm sure.
Well, that's why I was doing the 9 Inch Nails thing for him. Get closer.
I was just going to say,
I want
one
to
time,
violate
I'm doing fine so far. I'm chewing it for a while because of how beef jerky works. But one time I went to Buffalo Wild Wings, and I got their ghost pepper wings, which came with gloves, so that you could pick them up and eat them. And let me tell you, the pain that comes from eating super spicy foods up to that point is like threefold. You have the initial pain, which is in your mouth, and then you have the stomach, the sour stomach, for a day or two.
Okay.
Accompanied with the exit, because the capsaicin, I'm not sure how to say that word.
Capsaicin.
Capsaicin.
It doesn't fully digest, and so it hits your ring of fire on the way out.
The second harvest.
This is pretty hot. That's pretty good.
He's getting sweaty.
I sure am. So
Cam is. Go ahead.
Speaking of corrections, this is kind of what this episode is about. Not that Allie did a bad job talking about postmodernism, but you studied it. We learned some stuff from her, but you were like, I have studied this. There are some things I want to explain to help you understand it better.
I wish it wasn't like 6 months ago. I can remember all the things I was thinking about at the exact moment.
It was like a month ago.
Was it? It's been a long month for me. Let me tell you.
Yeah.
Well, if I remember correctly, like I think I also said that she's the closest I've heard anybody get to actually explaining what it is correctly.
Okay.
Which I was excited about. I don't know how she, because you and me were kind of, I was giving you the Cliff Notes version of it when we were actually, while I was listening, because I was at work listening. Mm-hmm. And going, hey Cam, so this is what she's saying, but this is probably more accurately what it means. So I guess the way I come at this is I studied phenomenology in college, and phenomenology, I guess, is technically different than postmodernism. I've had people try and tell me. I mean, you're still reading Derrida and Jean-Paul Sartre and all of the same people that make up the stuff, but I don't know why it's different. But for me, the whole core of postmodernism, it centers around what it actually says and the way people take it to mean. And you have people like Thaddeus Russell, I think, who take it to mean, they take it to an ought place when it's just an is place. So the idea in phenomenology, which is then taken place, this is like the basis of all of the modern, the idea behind all of the Grievance Studies things, is that you can never subtract yourself from your perception of the world, because the whole thing is based on perception. Now, if you can ever extract yourself from the perception of the world is always the world as you make it, because you're actively creating the world as yourself. Now, postmodernists will take the thing, well, if we can ever subtract ourselves from it, then we can never see the world as it actually is, which means that there is no world other than the one that I can see. Now, this is great if you want to go and break everything up and be like, oh yeah, so now if the only world is the world that I can see and you have to respect the world that I see, then yay, kumbaya. The problem is that that's jumping. It's jumping the shark, so to speak, because the world isn't necessarily, just because you can't see the world as it is doesn't mean it isn't there. Just try and believe that there is no truth. It is jumping over a whole bunch of hurdles, because whether or not you can see something is kind of irrelevant to its existence. Mm-hmm. You have to go get on the paywall. Michael Malice brutally slapped the shit out of Thaddeus in one of his episodes about this, and I love it. Nice. You have to go get in the You're Welcome like backlogs to get to see it. But his point was it's the same thing. It's like that, just because you don't see all the forces controlling the world, and even if you could, like, you can't subtract yourself from that seeing of them, doesn't mean they're not there. It just means you can't see them.
Can I back this up a little bit? Just because I'm not a philosophy student by any stretch of the imagination. I'm coming to this from a really simplistic standpoint. I learned about postmodernism, the word itself, from Jordan Peterson. I started watching Jordan Peterson's videos probably about a year or two ago. I heard Jordan Peterson talk about postmodernism, and when he talks about it, he means basically people who don't believe that there is any kind of objective truth. And so that's sort of the perception that I've had of people in the I haven't read Derrida, I haven't read Sartre or anything like that. I've just known it as people who have no belief that there is an objective truth, which doesn't necessarily make sense to me because of things like, we have a there's a number for gravity, for example. Gravity has a certain rate to it. We know what that rate is. So obviously there are objective truths.
Well, I would actually say, isn't your husband a physicist?
He is.
So I'm sure if you were to talk to him, he would say, well, it doesn't never quite actually line up perfect. It gets close. And then you can modify the equation based on like some other subtle thing that interacts on the thing. That's why I love getting into the philosophy versus religion debate with people, because they're both doing the same thing. They're both ways to explain and order the world around you in different ways. But that was my point. But
we have technology that operates on this evidence for these scientific concepts. So it's not as though they don't hold true.
Oh, I mean, and I'm sure you could go and find God's evidence that he's left for plenty of things in reality. Oh, yes, but anyways, back to the whole postmodernism thing. Okay,
right. So all I'm asking, I guess, is like maybe you can sort of, for someone that's as dumb as me, define simplistically what postmodernism means.
So what you have is you have a bunch of people that are taking this concept and stretching it beyond what it actually says.
Okay.
That's what I was getting at earlier. So in the core of like phenomenological studies is this idea that you can never subtract the I from the world around you. You can't see the world without yourself in it. Like you can't, like you're always looking through your eyes. So everything you have is based on all the knowledge that you have and not all the knowledge that everybody has. You can get into really complicated like study ideas, and that like, especially like you get into like age of consent and stuff like that, and it's like, well, stretch this out past a world where you're used to it. Clearly age of consent was different 100 years ago than it is now, and those people seemed fine with it. We don't, because we grow up in the world that we grow up in, and to do anything to change it, you'd literally have to take away all culture and everything around us to get to nothingness. And can you ever get to nothingness? No, because at the end of the day, there's still just you and what you're perceiving. Now, the problem is with postmodernists, what they actually do is they take this, well, because I'm always here, I can never see the truth. And since we all can never subtract ourselves from what we're seeing, there is no truth, because none of us we could never reach a consensus on anything. Okay. Because we all never see we could never actually see what would be true if it was there. Now, that seems like one hell of a claim to make from I can never see something to it just doesn't exist. And that is what the whole postmodern thing is doing, is taking this a perceptive idea and like stretching it way beyond what it means.
Maybe. Okay. So the question maybe needs to go a little further back than that for me. How can something, if we are always constantly sort of modern, we're modern to ourselves in the moment, we're the modern age to ourselves, what makes the philosophy postmodern? How are you ever getting post of what you are?
Well, so you're thinking of modern as a term and not as modern as a particular philosophical way of thinking.
Okay, so
it was a specific school of thought that was called modern philosophy. Like you have ancient philosophy, modern philosophy, and then you go to postmodern philosophy.
Okay.
Postmodern. The reason it's postmodern is because they started kind of picking at the things that everybody else took for granted. Now, that's like the thing that I personally love, and it's why when Thaddeus is right, he's 100% right when he says that every libertarian out there should love the idea of postmodernism, because the idea is you don't take for granted anything. You don't take as given what authority. Like authority is something that you kind of have to define for yourself and allow people to be authority over you. They don't just get it; you have to earn it.
Okay.
To get into like the specifics of the history, that would be getting outside of like my depth and scope of knowledge, because like primarily the stuff that I was really interested in philosophy was ethical theories, and how I stumbled across the whole phenomenology thing was like, this sounds like a really cool Pink Floyd-y kind of philosophy class. It was the hardest philosophy class I ever took in my life, by the way.
Okay.
So in our episode with Allie, kind of the main thing that I took away from it was that it's essentially postmodernism is an epistemology. It's a question of how do we know? And I remember you kind of went through the self and trying to take that out of the equation, or you can't take yourself out of the equation, and that everything's kind of built on agreements between people. But that was, I think what your problem was, if I'm remembering correctly, was that it kind of jumped into the conversation of ought, kind of like when I talked about egoism and a touch, is the idea that this is what ought to happen. And I think that's what you were kind of wanting to talk about, if I remember correctly.
The thing that the postmodernists will talk about is truth claims. And how do you make a truth claim about anything that you can't objectively see yourself? And if I make a truth claim based on what I perceive versus you make a truth claim on what you perceive, well, they're going to be at odds by nature of just we don't see the same things. And so if that's the case, then there is no truth between us that we could ever reach consensus on. And that to me is like, well, but there's certain aspects and certain parts that we're all going to kind of see, even despite being here. And maybe if you don't see it exactly the way I do, but these other 300,000 people do, well, I'm sorry, your perception is probably not, is even less seeing something more or seeing something correctly than we are. It's the idea of, if you start like, perception is so weird, because if you start like even at the basis of it, the idea that we can talk is the biggest miracle that's ever happened. Like if I say the word dog, all three of us can picture basic idea of a dog.
Wishbone.
Well, that's not at all what I was thinking of, because I was thinking of a Rottweiler. What were you thinking of, Jess?
It's okay. My name was supposed to be Jennifer, and everybody calls me Jen. It's really weird. I actually imagined my dog, who's a black pit bull.
Exactly. So how the fuck do we ever reach a consensus in what we're talking about? How does any meaning transfer between us when we can't even see the same thing? But somehow we all knew what the word dog meant, despite having completely different ideas of what dogs are.
Okay.
You see,
but
now,
still,
by the way,
we still imagined something that was basically the same species. We saw
absolutely
something with 4 legs, with a tail, with a waggly tail. We all kind of know what a dog is. So even if we imagine something slightly different from each other, we did imagine the same thing in essence.
And how simple was the concept I gave you? I gave you dog.
Right.
Now, let's take something and say courage.
Okay.
The cowardly
What
dog.
does the word courage mean?
The cowardly dog. Yeah.
That's actually funny. But take an abstract thought, and what does courage mean between the three of us?
I mean, I suppose that is a little harder to define in such a way that everyone agrees on what courage is.
But guess what? We all kind of do. We all come up with different ways we define it. So there's a sense-making thing that we all do naturally anyways. And these people just kind of want to say, yeah, but that's unimportant because this is the way I see it. That's just the way it is. I'm going to look for stay in the world that I live in, and you can stay in the world you live in, and pretend that we don't ever have to cross paths. And that's stupid. Like, that's why, like, anyone who's ever talked with Thad about this, it's like, well, I act as if there's gravity because seems to fucking be gravity. Like, the plane's not going to fall out of the sky because whether or not I can see the gravity for all of human history, and guess what? I guess it could change, but to pretend that's like some great thing is just stupid.
Well, that's what I'm talking about as far as the reason I mentioned gravity when I bring up postmodernism is because the planes do stay in the air. We all know that if we leave our house by our second floor window, we're going to fall to the earth and break our leg. That's why we leave by the front door instead of the second floor window. We can't just postmodernly decide that we can leave out our window and then walk through the air, as far as I know.
Well, and that's my point. Like the people that we guess would call themselves postmodernists, they're taking what was a really good idea, which is a good, like, people don't understand, like they get this sense of like, oh well, once an idea's happened, we have to see everything from our perspective in regards to the idea. Well, once you imagine, like, let's see, most of these books I think are written in like the 30s or 40s, and imagine the first person who says, well, hey guys, we're all trying to talk about this topic and we all keep kind of reading a dead end. Do you think part of that is just because we all carry our own biases and our own history to the table, that we have difficulty seeing the same thing? So now to really, truly get to a center and to really get to a truth, we have to now realize that we could never actually see it, but we can kind of reach a consensus on what it might be. Like what a big idea that is, to just say, hey, this is something that maybe isn't actually visible, and maybe that's something we have to learn to grapple with. From a philosophical standpoint, that's a huge thing. Like, we're all assuming for the entirety of human history that there's some type of truth that we'll objectively be able to see.
Would you say that postmodern, because a lot of times when people hear the word philosophy, they're not thinking about epistemology, which is the ability to know. They're not thinking about these things. They're thinking about a kind of structure for life. They're kind of thinking about a way to think about things. Would you consider postmodernism to be a tool rather than a mindset or like a life philosophy? Because that's what it sounds like to me. It sounds like skepticism.
It's basically a codified reason for skepticism. Like for anyone to why it gets used in Grievance Studies is so if you and me, Cam, come to this, we come to the world with an understanding that male hegemony over the species has been a thing for a long time. Like, and we can't take away from the fact that we historically have had a position of power over women, for most of history, in certain realms, at the very least. Now you can get in an argument and say, well, yes, but women decide if babies happen. So
they decide if sex happens for the most part.
They've decided the entire course of human history by who to fuck. So
Jessica's face right now.
But
I'm chewing on what you're saying.
But understanding that we're carrying that weight with us. So my daughter is watching us behind me on her tablet. It's adorable. She's just, Daddy, look, it's you.
Aww.
She got me sidetracked. Where was I going with this?
We were talking about perception for like how we perceive the world and coming to consensus.
And that's so phenomenology is the study of, it is the philosophy of perception. Like, is literally what it is. It's why I was interested in it. It's like, interesting. Like, what is this thing all about? And what's useful, like, say, for quote unquote postmodernist people, is that it kind of gives them an out if they take it too far, and saying like, well, because you have a dick, I don't have to listen to anything you say because historically you have oppressed people, and I need to take away your power before we can get to an equal playing field. It's about deconstructing, sources of power. But it's not a neat and clean thing, and they want it to be. The bottom line is, okay, we can take away my power and the fact that I come from that, but does that simplify and take away agency from women historically? Like, and now we take that cross section. How does race factor in this? How does which child in the family you're born affect all this? It's far too complicated to deconstruct the whole fucking thing. Like, the web would be insane, and no one could live their life doing it.
Right.
But having a key insight that we can say, all right, well, I'm going to come into this conversation understanding that I'm going to see things a certain way, and that's going to shade them will help me better understand where someone else is coming to a conversation from. And there it gives us more room to meet in the middle and say, well, hey, since I come from this place and I see things this way, maybe it's fair to say that I'm kind of pushing in one direction more than is necessary based on what my personal history is. And maybe you're trying to push things. So when we try and meet in a place in the middle, this kind of makes more sense than anything. It kind of squares with both of our personal histories. And so you kind of get a perception of, you get a sense of the more things overlap between you, me, and Cam and everybody else on the earth. Granted, you're not really seeing the truth because it's just kind of this thing that everything has in common, but the thing that everything has in common is probably the truth.
Okay.
So do you think truth is derived from consensus?
Absolutely. Now, let's say the truth that we would operate through life as, yes.
Okay.
Because how would you get to actual truth other than through yourself? You can never take the tool out of it. So the only real way to reach a truth is to kind of see where everything kind of coincides between you and everyone else. And it may not be the whole truth, but it's part of the truth. And it can lead you to the truth. If you start getting into, like, say, like if you have a situation, if you take the word of God to be the word of God as he wrote this on the page himself through these men's hands and takes out all culture and the person writing it, and it's just literally jetted out of his brain onto the page,
Horrible way to read the Bible.
Then maybe you could believe that there is a some type of truth. But the bottom line is, if you stay here on planet Earth, that was a person that wrote that in a certain time, in a certain place. And so when you read anything, you have to understand that, well, this is the context of where this was written. Now there's a context of where I'm at. All these things have transpired since then. This is what the language would have meant back then. What is really being said here? And that's a whole lot of people with their own personal shit and like the world's own shit at that point, coming to agreements about what things are supposed to mean.
So what happens when the world goes mad? When we see people who are definitely choosing to believe things that have not coincided with what the majority of humans have believed for most of history. And if those things have been good for our survival and now are suddenly being thrown out, would it not matter that whether most people now agree with them or not, that they're not conducive to our survival? If they're not conducive to our survival, then how can we arrive at them as truth?
Well,
which is
the problem you're describing, I think, is actually in reverse of what the real problem is.
Okay.
The real problem is that everyone reaches a consensus and then this one aberration decides something else that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Throughout human history, the aberration has been pushed out and shunned and destroyed, murdered, whatever it is that you want to do, the thing that doesn't necessarily agree with it. And throughout history, it's been borne out that change happens through aberration, people seeing things through a different perspective, which is why the whole concept of really understanding biases and things of this nature is so important to understand, is that it's going to be in the cracks and the ways that people see things differently that we're going to progress as human beings, that we're going to find that next technology, we're going to find that next key concept, we're going to find the next beautiful, great piece of art. It's all through the personal understanding of what truth is. Now, and I think art's the greatest example where you get to see a more powerful, a more potent version of someone else's idea of truth.
Right. So go ahead, Cam.
No, I was just going to ask. So for you, you say we kind of come across truth as a product of consensus, but would you personally say that there is truth that's just beyond our understanding? That there is some objective truth out there?
And that's the idea. It's the idea of absolute truth. And I think we all have to function as though there is some sense of absolute truth. Once again, the key of the whole postmodernist, the core of what postmodernism uses is that whether or not that's there, I have to understand that I can't see it. It's, by the way, I mean,
that's beyond me.
You could call that God. No matter what you do and who you are, you're never going to be able to see God because you couldn't comprehend it if you could. There's just too much there. Like, so it's like, it's be all of a sudden seeing the source code for everything that is. Like, what would life be?
Mm-hmm. I certainly thought of God when you were talking about that. It's like, well, obviously God. And we had kind of touched on the beginning, and you said that you love when religion runs up against this. And I wondered how
they're the same thing. Like, you can put your faith in one thing versus another. You can search for your meaning in the world in one thing or another. But ultimately, you're both. Religion is a sense-making thing. It's there to make sense of the world around you. Some people, it's easier to look at beautiful historical stories of these lessons that are timeless and believe that there is some being out there that's kind of guiding things. For other people, it's nice to look at math equations on a piece of paper that tell them exactly how things are the way they are. And if you could get all the math equations and plug them all in just right, you could get that perfect picture of exactly how the world is. But if you talk to anyone in physics, you never actually get the exact thing. You always get kind of like a just off facsimile, because you can always put in some type of equation for some other force that acts on it. Like, if you talk celestial bodies, there's all the gravity between the bodies, and there's the gravity of a meteor that might happen to fly through at this point in time. At this, like everything, because everything acts on everything, and the world is so complex. It would be an endless string of numbers to get reality, but we can get close.
So a lot of people have argued, especially people in like the physics realm, have argued that the universe seems to be set up according to mathematic law. And mathematics is a type of logic. It's something like born of intellect. And so that suggests order to the universe. And, that's sort of like, maybe like, I wouldn't say like that mathematics is an objective truth, but there definitely seems to be an ordered intellect to the ordering of the universe, why the universe is the way that it is. It is specific. It has a very matter has to have a very specific frequency, or it doesn't exist. If we're 1 point off this way or 1 point off the other way, matter can't coalesce. So according to these laws that we understand with our intellect, the universe is ordered.
You'll get no argument out of me.
Right.
Once again, the thing is it's about where you come into that equation, where you come into that at.
Okay.
Like, so you, me, and Cam are all mostly dead space. If you look at us at a matter standpoint,
I'm mostly adipose though.
Atomic, like atoms are mostly empty space, and we're all made of atoms.
Okay.
Now we all perceive ourselves as being solid. But if someone were to sit there, and it is not at odds for me to say, you are basically nothing. Like, you're just mostly empty space. But I perceive you as a solid being because that's the way physics works. Like the way that empty space and forces work. Like you're an actual person. Like I can't throw water through you. But both of those statements are definitely true.
You could say, like, for example, that a concrete wall is mostly empty space, but if you slam into it at 80 miles an hour, you're definitely going to encounter like electromagnetic force, inertia, these other things.
The exact same thing. Like, if you make it even more confusing, like water, you fall, you can dive into a pool, but if you fall at the same pool from 100 feet in the air, you're going to hit it like a concrete wall.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's about at 150 feet. Yeah. Water becomes basically like hitting concrete.
Exactly.
And bullets don't go through it. So every time I see a movie and someone shoots someone through water, I'm like, well, that's not a real thing.
So imagine you're an atom and you're looking out at the world from your own position. What are you going to see?
Atoms.
Mostly
atoms,
mostly empty space and a lot of atoms.
Mm-hmm.
But hey, we get the perception of seeing the world as humans. We don't see atoms unless we work really, 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 really hard. What we see is a bunch of really complex, interesting things around us at all times. Once again, like, the basis of everything now is...
This sounds like a matter of scope.
Well, once again, perception, scope, whatever you want to call it, it's the idea of where you're at in everything that defines what you see, and as a sense defines truth. For that atom, the world is mostly just empty space. For you and me, it's full of a bunch of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, neither one of those is technically wrong, but we see because of how we see things, and that atom's never going to see the world the way we see it because it can't, because it's not a human being, it's just an atom. We, on the other hand, have this beautiful ability to see things the way we see them and use our brains to kind of poke and see what else is out there and look to see if maybe there's not a different way to perceive things. And that's where I think that the whole postmodern thing really fucks up, is that they like to pretend that we can't ever step out of ourselves and discuss, like, it's like the idea I can't get a sense of how you feel and how you see things.
Okay, so
like I can't only see things the way I do.
Isn't that sort of the essential thing that makes us human beings, is that we're able to perceive into the future, for example, which is not something that, as far as we know, animals do, or inanimate objects or plants or any other kind of creature, as far as we know, can perceive into the future. And which is something that we do all the time, and we perceive into the past. And
I would never personally make that claim, because plants can do a lot of wild shit.
Well, and squirrels collect nuts for the winter. So, I mean, like, there are these things that how much of this is human-centered logic?
Do you think that squirrels are collecting the nuts for the future because they're seeing the future, like they're seeing their future unraveling before them, or that they have a base instinct that tells them to collect nuts together?
How do you know what you have isn't a base instinct?
Yeah,
and you fancy it up with a bunch of other shit.
Fancy it up.
Yep.
I mean,
we're fancy.
We are fancy. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. See, that's the thing. Like, we can't know that for sure. But there seems to be a unique quality in human beings that doesn't necessarily seem to be borne out in other animals.
Well, you just said something that to me exemplifies exactly why I think the whole postmodern thing and the way that it works is just so stupid. You said, well, you're right, we can't see that. But guess what? We all act as if we have an understanding of what it's going to be in the future, because we've kind of agreed that, well, maybe I can't see it, but it seems to make sense that this would be the case. And we all kind of go to that place.
Okay, but isn't that at its very nature the way that science is conducted? Like, we have to collect data, fancy like a date night at Applebee's. The very first step in science is to collect observations, to put data together, and then use that data to make suppositions about the world, and then we test those suppositions.
Okay,
and
how about this?
if we cannot disprove the supposition, we have an evidence-based trust. And you never say that anything is proven. You only say that it has failed to be disproven.
I agree.
Yeah.
You have a lot of trust in a lot of different things in there. A lot of people finding it's like, which side of the line you choose to pick when you're taking a measurement of something. Like, say you're looking for distance, and well, where are we at here? Am I at this side of the line, or am I that side of the line? That could be entirely based on how fucking shitty the person doing the measuring had as their day and where they started. Like, where do you put your start point? Is it here? Is it, do I line the beginning up just before, or measuring tools is, I guess, what they say. The way that the person using the tools uses the tools already acts on what that's going to do in the future and how that information is going to be used. Once again, you can never take out human action and human error from the being of something. And then even if you have that number, here's a good idea on what numbers mean perceptually. 800,000 people have died of a particular disease.
Some unnamed disease. Yeah.
This sounds awful, right? Until you look at what a percentage of the population that is, and you're like, oh shit, why are we worried about this?
Right.
All based on the same number. We're seeing the same thing. But how we feel about that number changes very wildly the implications that number has in reality. And what is the truth of that number? We're both seeing the same number. But to some people, the truth is that the world is ending. To others, the truth is, well, this is just a day like any other. Now,
I don't think that our brains were meant to conceptualize, like, for example, 800,000 deaths, far flung as they might be all over the globe. I don't think we're meant to, like, conceptualize everything that's happening all at the same time. Like, you could never fit it into your brain to have this totally accurate perception of the world. Like, you couldn't perceive an entirely accurate perception of the world. So we do accept a certain level of what's the word I'm looking for? A certain level of error, you know, give or take, plus or minus 0.001, you know, depending on whatever we're looking at. But at the same time, we still trust that the principles of lift will work when we get into an airplane, you know, and on that 0.001
unless you're
chance,
a postmodernist.
Unless you're a postmodernist. Well, yeah, but I mean, at the same time, thousands of planes fly around every single day. And we pretty much know that if you take an aircraft and you put it at a certain speed and it's the right shape, it'll lift up into the air. So and you have to.
And the sun's going to rise again tomorrow. Unless an asteroid blows it up tonight. And, well, technically blows it up a couple light years ago. But
well, it's like there is something to be said about, like what you said about humans being able to understand large numbers or large quantities of, or even time. Because I was talking to my son the other day, and he's so stoked that he can count to 200, and he's like, Dad, how high can you count? And I was like, well, if you can count to 100 and then you can count to 1,000, I mean, it's all the same thing. Just over and over.
Did you use base 10 in that conversation?
I would always use base 10.
Just say, hey, son, it's all about base 10.
But he was like, I'm going to count to 1 billion. And I was like, you better be prepared to be doing that for at least the next 32 years, but probably more, because if you're saying them out loud, there's just no way that would be 1 second per time you say a number. And he was like, wait, 31 years. I was like, there's a good chance that, well, no, not a good chance. I'll probably still be alive then. But like, old time life expectancy, I would be dead by the time you counted that number. Like I will be elderly. And it was just this crazy little moment when I was talking to him, and his perception was completely changed because, 1 million takes a couple weeks, but 1 billion takes 32 years. And it's just impossible for people to understand that. That's why when I see people talking about like national debt or anything like that, and they're like, look at this big number. It's like, no one's going to know what that means.
When I was a little kid,
that big.
When I was little, and I remember asking my dad a similar question along the lines of, how high can you count? And he said, as high as you can count, and then I add 1. And that was just kind of like, oh, it never stops, does it? Like the addition of numbers never stops.
So are we going to get into like the degrees of infinity?
I couldn't even speak on that.
Yeah. So, okay, let me see if I can kind of conceptualize what we've been talking about here, because I'm like a dumbass coming into this conversation. I'm just trying to understand the concept. So what we're saying is that it's impossible for a human mind, no matter how educated or how many numbers or how many measuring tools it has, to actually perceive an accurate picture of the universe. And if we agree that we can't perceive an accurate picture of the universe, then we have to acknowledge the level of error, not only in our own minds, but each other's minds, and arrive at consensus that we can both agree on to have any definable truth.
I don't like the word error.
Okay.
Because, I mean, it's not an error that you're seeing something. It's just the way you're seeing it that may deviate from quote unquote absolute truth. Because once again, you just don't have, there's missing data anywhere. That's a sequence of events that allows the ruler that you're using to measure could have come out of a set of rulers that was 1 millimeter off at its base, and now so everything that's ever measured with that, and then the thermometer that you use on the next part of the system, that one's just always going to be a degree over what everybody else's is. And now, you don't know that. You have no way of knowing that. You'd have to go prove your thermometer and measuring device against every other one in the world. And guess what? They're all going to be different. In much the same way that we're all going to be.
scientists do acknowledge this. When I was a biology major, every measuring tool we had some measure on it that said plus or minus 0.00 something. There was some acknowledgement that this tool, based on the guy who made it that day sneezing, could be off by X amount of points. And we sort of like write that into our scientific work.
Mm-hmm.
So like that's definitely something that, like, even when you see science as sort of like a way to arrive at truth, a winnowing stick, if you will, from divining truth from error, there is that acknowledgement.
And so there's like this is kind of like philosophy catching up to science in that regard.
Okay.
And kind of telling itself that you're trying to talk about ideas and the way that human beings see things and the way that we react with each other. And to do that, a core precept that you're going to have to accept, in whether this was not always the case that they would have bothered, is that I can't see the world without through in any way that's not through my eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I like read the way somebody else's world is, I'm still reading it through the lens of how I perceive that person. So it's like you can get really, really close, and I think the more, like, I think consensus is a great thing, because the more people you get kind of seeing things, you can kind of cross a lot of ideas, and the more different kinds of people you have seeing things, the more you can see what might be the truth of what you've always thought is true. You're gonna see, well, maybe they don't see all the same things I do, but they'll see some of the same things I do, and these people over here see some of the same things I do, and at the core of that, you get closer to defining what might be an absolute truth. Now, also understanding that, and even the place in the universe, like say we're sitting here on Earth and we're saying, oh man, the sun's going to rise tomorrow. We know that only in so much as it always has. Now, there could be somebody sitting there watching in a telescope as a meteor crashes in the sun and knows the day it's going to happen, and they know 100% accurately that the sun's not going to rise tomorrow for us.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's because their perception of reality is from a different place. And they can see something, they have information that we don't have. Mm-hmm. And as long as we're all finding out new information and seeing things from different perspectives, like what really will our truth ever be, other than this thing that we chase, perhaps unattainably? We can always get closer to it, never quite reaching it. And I mean, frankly, from an atheist perspective, it is very interesting in that you look for truth. I mean, the idea of truth and God are almost entirely synonymous, because it's an ideal, it's a thing to chase after, but perhaps never actually reach.
I have noticed this tendency in atheists, and I did it myself when I was an atheist, which was that you still want there to be a God in that way. You just don't want to call it God. You don't want to acknowledge, Christianity or Islam or whatever it is that you're running away from, but you still need that sort of like bearing in truth.
I'm running away now, am I?
No, I'm making a broad statement
this
about
her perception.
My perception. Right. That there's that sort of clinging to objective truth, clinging to scientific truth, saying that this is what is, this is what is true. They still need something to be true. You still need an earth to walk upon. You need to know that when you step outside onto the ground will hold you. When you get into a plane, the plane will carry you. Whatever those things are, you still need that. You need your reality to hold together. And even if at some point the sun will explode in the sky, which, as far as we know, it will at some point.
Yep.
You still need to operate in your life day to day with the presumption that the sun is going to rise tomorrow. And what is sort of happening, unfortunately, in our culture right now is that this concept of postmodernism, which when we're talking about it in like a scientific realm, makes a lot of sense to me. Like all of the things that you're saying to me right now make sense, and I agree with them basically. Like we have consensus, you and I. But I think like there's this way that it's being used in culture that is a whole sort of different can of worms, where we're now saying, okay, men give birth, all of the various things that are coming sort of out of the, I think I heard you call it Grievance Studies.
Yes.
Is that what you're referring to when you talk about
a lot of people
studies?
call Grievance Studies. It's like black studies, women's studies, Asian American studies at the colleges. They're classified as grievance studies depending on
so
who you're talking to.
I'm willing to apply what you're talking about to the sun rising. Like I'm fairly certain that the physicists have some backing to say one day the sun is going to explode in the sky because they've observed it happening in other places. They observed black holes in the mathematics before they ever observed them in the telescope. And so they have an evidence-based trust of why these things are happening.
So,
however, when we're applying that to culture, it seems to be deleterious to me.
And here's where the thing is. Here's the difference. You saying when we do this, what good are really advanced tools in astrophysics to you or me in most cases?
Oh, useless. It doesn't mean that I observed a black hole in mathematics. I have never observed a black hole in mathematics.
I have a thrust here. That's my point. Yeah. So
I was just going to say real quick, the idea of observing black holes in mathematics, that makes no fucking sense to me whatsoever.
Oh, we'll get Kevin to talk to you about it.
That means you were taught math wrong.
It's trust me.
I found a black hole and some numbers.
Well, no, this is the reason
they observed. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say I've been trying to get someone to write a book for years. You have no idea how many friends I have at my age of kids that hate math, and if you hate math, it's because someone tried to teach you math without physics. Because the minute you learn that math can go and create these beautiful, complex pictures and visions of how the world operates around you, the minute you can go and see a black hole in numbers before it actually see it in reality, how can you not think that's the most amazing and beautiful thing in the world? And the idea that we pulled math out of that and teach it as some abstraction is just fucking criminal.
Right.
But once again, what I was getting at with Jess was, so is you and I can't use physicists' tools. You were asking fucking politicians to use philosophers' tools. You might as well just go and give a 4-year-old a fucking scalpel and say, here you go, kids. You don't know what the hell they're doing. And guess what? That 4-year-old's going to do a lot of damage in much the same way that a politician is going to do a lot of damage with a very simple concept. Because if you don't understand the way in which that concept is useful and kind of the boundaries for what it can do and probably shouldn't do, well, you're going to run the risk of doing a lot of awful shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, say, rip apart an entire culture.
Yeah,
right.
Which is, I think we're observing that in real time, our culture being ripped apart
and
by concepts that don't make any sense.
Well, and that's the thing, is the concept makes sense. It's just what people try and do with the concept that it becomes dangerous. Like, at the end of the day, understanding that you and I see the world differently and have different viewpoints, and that's going to change how we relate to each other it's a very, very important understanding. Now,
sure,
taking that to say that we can never come to an agreement on anything because we'll never be able to see the world in any meaningful way together, which is what they want you to believe. The whole point is the way it's being used now is they want you to think that you can't ever see the truth. You can't ever. So it's just, we're going to beat each other up with our own worldviews forever. But we know that that's bullshit. Like, humanity's been agreeing and creating consensus on things forever. So of course we can do that.
Even to the point where these things are beneficial to our survival. We're talking about the way that culture is ordered, not just here. Every culture on the planet has some things about it that are commonalities that run true through most of the cultures. And they've been ordered that way because they're good for survival. Even if you take God completely out of the discussion, we say that, okay, at the very least, these things are ordered the way that they are because they benefit human survival. And now we're taking that and throwing that into the wind and saying none of this applies because some of it has been used for oppression. Some of it has been used for evil. And sure, some people have, used power structures for their own benefit. Like, that's like, again, one of those things that I think is like, maybe, I don't want to say a universal truth, but like, it's something that most of us have consensus on, that people will abuse authority if they're given it. So, we're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, and it's concerning. And I see why people turn around and say postmodernism is evil, because it's taking the order of our culture, turning it on its head, and not in any kind of like innovative, actually progressive way.
Well, how about this? It's like people in the 50s watching black people move into their neighborhood and going, "Oh, the world's burning down around us," and it's not really what's happening. It's just your perception of what's happening based on you saw one black person do something terrible one time. And that's unfortunately what we have a bunch of fucking crazy people taking ownership of something and trying to destroy the world around them.
Well, they do that with science too. Look at all of the different ways the world was going to end over the past 30, 40 years, 100 years. How there was going to be a new ice age. Now it's
there actually is going to be a new ice age. No one's ever actually floundered on the ice age thing. That's really happening.
Well, but the timeline.
Well, and year 2000. And that's the thing. Now, science has never actually wavered on any of that. But since you were told science by fucking politicians and journalists, they kind of decide what the science is by the time it gets to you. If you actually go and read the, the LPCC or whatever the study is, I used to, back when I was doing an environmentalist podcast, I used to be better up on it. Science doesn't change much on this. People's perception of it changes. The
there will absolutely be another ice age. I think that from what we can tell, there are cycles. But
we're running into a grand solar minimum right now.
Yeah, right. I've heard of this. Yeah.
And so all I'm saying is that even some of the scientists that went to the journalists, those pet scientists, the people you see today that tell you everything that's going to happen in the next 12 years, the same type of scientists that are paid by certain people to get certain things pushed through.
No, see, and actually that's where you're wrong. Go actually read Michael Schellenberger's Apocalypse Never.
Well, no, I'm talking.
What you'll
about,
find out is those scientists
ones who made like bets.
Nope, that's the thing. I'm telling you right now that's not even a thing. If you actually go read the studies that the scientists come up, they're just being fucking mistold to you. Like they'll say, well, there's a possibility in the worst case scenario that if this one thing happens, yes, it could maybe lead to this 200 years down the road. And by the time that reaches you, it's a journalist going, the fucking world's going to end in 12 years if we don't just completely destroy all of our society. Now, the reason that's what happens is because, well, you could get conspiratorial, but just go look what the UN has wanted to do for 60 years. Go watch an episode of Captain Planet and tell me how you were indoctrinated as a child.
I wasn't allowed to watch Captain Planet.
Why?
Because it was environmentalist bullshit.
Oh.
If you guys, have you never watched me and or listened to me and Ben from Run Your Mouth Coffee do our deconstruction of the episodes?
I have not.
No.
I think we got like 8 or 9 episodes into the series before we kind of both let life get in the way of podcasting. But we went a bunch of episodes deep into the first season where we like watch them and kind of talk about them. And oh man, watching those things as a near 40-year-old man, looking at the shit they were trying to tell us kids. Wow, it's amazing any of us are able to live in reality.
When I was a kid, I thought the world would be over by now. I thought like we would have destroyed the planet, the forests would have all been burned down. And like the truth is, if we stop using fossil fuels, that the forests would be decimated like overnight. Because that's the only way people would have to like heat their homes and feed their children.
Well,
and
there would be a lot more dead people in general. Because I mean, plastics do a whole hell of a lot for the world. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, while you're having this stupid conversation about particles of, dust in the air, you're not talking about soil erosion and how all of our arable farmland is being completely destroyed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You're not talking about how we waste acres upon acres of arable land as fucking yards. Mm-hmm. Because some asshole king wanted to wave his dick a bunch of generations ago and say, I'm so fucking wealthy, I don't even have to use my land for productive capacity.
Every time I'm mowing my lawn, I curse the French monarchy because they are the reason I'm out there mowing that bullshit in the heat. Like, this should not be a thing, and yet it is.
And because we learned wrong how to farm 20,000 years ago, the alternative would be more backbreaking work. When if you realized, hey, no, like there's regenerative agriculture and I can go and set things up to grow for themselves.
Yeah.
But most people don't realize, no, that's even a thing. So
basically turning my backyard back into a meadow, which would have been its original state.
You don't think you could do something more constructive with it?
Well, it is basically bare clay at this point. Like anything grown in it, I have to bring soil and I have to bring nutrients into it. So if I reconstitute the meadow on top of it, it will eventually start to rebuild its own soil. Maybe many years after I have left, but I have to let roots get down into it before life will take on.
Go and watch a movie. It's a documentary called Need to Grow.
Okay.
And then come back to me and be like, my mind has been completely blown. The government is trying to kill us all.
Well, I already think that. So you're like, let's not get conspiratorial.
There's a better way.
Do you know how crazy I actually am? Like, if you talk to me late enough into the evening, you'll find out how crazy I am.
What's funny is that you watch that movie or the documentary, and like there's a point in it where the guy holds up this piece of metal from. I actually showed this to some friends, new friends of mine the other day, and I'm like, go watch this documentary because there's gonna come a point, and he's like, I actually showed them the building that 2/3 of the way through the documentary, the building burns down for this thing that the guy, it's a green powerhouse, and it is basically it's a way to hypercycle regeneration of soil and plant nutrition. It basically goes through and does at rapid speed what nature is going to do anyways. And the whole system's combined of like this giant building that grows algae in it. It's full of water. And then this incinerator that burns up like scrap wood and things of that nature. It burns up earth material. And so it does this, and it only has one waste product. And this waste product is enough electricity to run 150 homes.
Wow.
While making your land's nutrition fucking skyrocket. And 2/3 of the way through the movie, it burns down. And you're looking at this incinerator completely intact next to a building that was full of algae and fucking water. And that thing burned to the ground. And the guy who's like in charge just picks up this piece of metal off the ground. He's like, it's weird. And the guy's like, well, what's that? I was like, well, I mean, this was designed to, take the effects of an engine. Like it's a piece of metal that's melted that was supposed to be able to take like actual engine propulsion temperatures.
Yeah.
And here it is melted. So how the fuck did this giant room full of water just fucking explode and burn to nothingness like in an instant?
So are you familiar?
The generator next door, the incinerator next door is untouched.
Are you familiar with the back to Eden process of gardening?
Yeah, actually, I was watching John Prigioni. It's a YouTuber. He was doing it. Just
I know about John.
Dump a bunch of freaking wood in the backyard and let it do what it's going to do.
So that's the process that there's a documentary called Back to Eden, and it's a like maybe 2 or 3 hour documentary about this guy Paul, who I'm pretty sure is still alive, but he's quite old now. And his entire process for the way that he gardens on his property, he took from the Bible, and says that basically the Bible is telling us how to be regenerative with our soil. And instead of stripping everything off of it, each grow process should add more nutrient content back into our soils. Yep. And he does that with wood chip. Like basically, so I took this on, I watched this, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I did all of this in my backyard. And my backyard is a wildflower meadow right now. And it started with wood chips.
Do you know why all that's the case? What that does?
It adds the carbon the carbon materials that break down, and then the mycelium and all of those combinative processes get together to create the soil. So the clay is part of it. The clay is already there. The clay is the raw
other
earth.
stuff back into it.
Yes. So you got to get the other stuff. So it's like not just wood chips, it's the growth of the plants.
It's the growth of the microbiome. It's the key. That thing that we all talk about, your gut biome and your guess what? All the little critters are really fucking important. And guess what? Industrial agriculture doesn't take into consideration the little critters.
Right.
And I mentioned earlier, like you were asking me about, I think animals and plants or whatever. And I said, well, I'm not choosing any one of those. Which one's the smartest one? Because plants, when you start getting into like the mycelium network, and you're watching something happens here affects like the way trees are growing 500 miles away because the mycelium network is like a giant neural net between here and there. Yeah, man, I'm not willing to say that plants might not be the most intelligent thing on the planet. It's like a brain literally the size of the planet when you grow all the mushrooms together. So I was trying to do broad strokes purposes, but I've seen a lot of the information that you're talking about. For example, how older trees will shunt nutrients to younger trees. And there's a lot of things. I mean, I don't want to get too wacky with it, but that what was that movie, Fern Gully in Space? I love Fern Gully.
But it was
My name is Betty. My logic is erratic.
But what's the one with the people, the blue people? Avatar. So a lot of the things that they talk about, the way that the trees communicate in Avatar, actually came from some papers that a biologist did when she was studying redwood trees, and how the redwood trees would sort of like communicate under the forest floor through the use of mycelium, which is basically like mushrooms, fungus. And so they're able to like I was saying, shunt nutrients from the older trees to the younger trees, or trees that need it. If a tree is diseased, it can make sure that it's getting its proper nutrients or what it needs to like. Also, if a certain bug is attacking a plant, it can give off pheromones that attract the predator of the bug that's attacking it.
Well, if you want to get real wild, they've done studies that'll show, like, say you as a person are deficient in a vitamin, will show your plants in your garden actually overproducing that vitamin to try and
That's interesting.
To try and and maybe the reason you're deficient is because your body doesn't actually get it. So like the thing that you would think is, oh, well, I'm not getting the nutrition from where I'm at. Well, maybe it's just a problem in how your body treats the nutrition, because like I said, they've done the studies and seen, oh, well, you're low in vitamin K, and this particular, all your plants are having an abundance of vitamin K and like overproducing it for what they should. It gets real fucking wild out there.
Yeah.
and by the way, you can call that God. I would just call that the way it is. whatever truth is, I think we don't need to add a bunch of layers of old shitty cultures on top of getting to the core of what's there or what's not there.
I don't know. Some of those cultures are not so shitty, and I think they've been extremely beneficial to our survival.
Oh,
even if you want to take the mystical element, the Mysterian, out of it, you could at least say that it's been very, very beneficial to.
You'll get no argument here,
right?
But much like any other tool, at some point you need to decide: do I still need this particular tool, or is there a better tool out there? I think a lot of people have grabbed onto shittier tools as opposed to finding better tools,
like postmodernism.
That would be a wonderful shittier tool. Or at least a tool being used improperly.
Yeah, well, then that's what's interesting to me is like all of the last few minutes have been very tangible, and I appreciate tangibility. I think that when we're having this conversation, I think that we're doing a lot better job, or you're doing a lot better job than most people who talk about postmodernism, because they don't know how to talk about it. They don't even know how to make it interesting because they can't even agree on terms. It's like, I swear to God, I know it isn't this, but it's like, if you put an objectivist and a postmodernist in the same room and had them talk, it would be the most horrible thing to ever witness ever, because objectivists, they are very specific about their definitions of words and how they don't mean the thing that the zeitgeist or the agreement of that word means. And then you have the opposite end, which is the postmodernist saying the exact opposite.
Anything. It doesn't mean anything. Whatever.
Can you imagine a more horrible conversation to listen to?
Both are so irritating. That's true.
Wait, so how are we setting this up? We're getting Thaddeus Russell and what's his name from the Ayn Rand Institute?
Yaron Brook.
Yeah, Yaron Brook. Let's get these two together.
I don't want to
we need to get that Mark guy who started who did the objectivist political party or whatever. Him and Thaddeus together would be insufferable.
It would be terrible. But one of the things that I find interesting is a friend of mine on Twitter, who I don't know his real name. I'm going to call him Pizza because that's the only name I know him by. He and another guy were arguing about philosophy because his take is that there are all these different philosophies, and these are different tools that you can put on your tool belt for life. And so you may have a use for postmodernism at this point. You may have a use for another philosophy here. And the argument was that philosophy isn't tools. It's almost holistic in its application. Would you disagree with, if you were to disagree, which one would you disagree with? Because I'm curious if you see philosophy as a tool.
Well, first off, what are you talking about in philosophy? Like, just, are you talking specifically metaphysics? Like, are we talking ethical theory? Like, well, which part of what?
One of the pieces. Well, that's the thing. It wasn't a particularly deep conversation, but they were talking about postmodernism, and I believe the other person was talking about stoicism. And so he was saying, I need that skepticism in my tool belt of postmodernism, but I like to use stoicism in my day-to-day life to affect myself. And just the idea of calling philosophy tools was anathema to the other person in the conversation.
Well, that person sounds stupid to me, but
which one?
the person that didn't look at philosophy as tools. I mean, both of those things bring different things to the table. I guess you could say that there are philosophical theories, but once again, then you start getting more into religion than philosophy at that point. Like you I guess I don't understand how you can even say that. So you can say that, so someone with a utilitarian worldview versus somebody with a a Christian worldview are going to do very, very different things, and they're both philosophies, but neither one of those is affected by neither one of those specifically incorporates or doesn't incorporate postmodern theory.
Right. Well, and that's like we were talking with Kim.
What the fuck is this person even talking about?
Yeah, we were talking with Kim in the last episode about Stoicism, and there's a lot of push against people who are Christians and utilize Stoicism. And in that, that conversation reminded me of that argument about philosophy being a tool.
Okay.
Because
really,
obviously,
they seem so close to me.
So the basics of most of my study in philosophy was in ethics. And I remember my intro to ethics in freshman year. And you'd have this girl at the front of the class who had answered every single question wrong anytime it was brought up. Because she's a Christian. In her worldview, the only thing that determines whether something is right or wrong is God. Completely incapable of looking at the fact, well, a lot of people don't even fucking believe in God, and they still look at things as right or wrong too. And how does that happen? Some people look at right or wrong as, well, the greater number of people get positivity out of this, and that's what defines it as right or wrong. Some people define it as, like if there's an intrinsic value, let's say to a human being, and like their core precept is you're just not allowed to act violence against them unprovoked. These all construct what makes something right or wrong. So whether or not God does it is just one way of arriving at a right or wrong. And this girl literally was completely fucking incapable of seeing that you could look at the world in different ways. The only way right or wrong happen is through God. And what you're telling me right now is the same fucking thing. Some people are incapable of realizing that, well, other people have different ways of seeing the world. Bottom line.
I don't know if that's necessarily a mark of Christianity as much as it was a mark of that girl's level of understanding.
Oh no, that wasn't what I was getting at. Like my point was just to utilize a very specific example for my freshman year, and I was like, God, this is stupid. Like, I'm capable of going and looking at your ethical theory and seeing this is why you see things as right or wrong. How are you not capable of stepping outside of yourself enough to go, oh, well, if I were this person and these were the core values of my particular way in the world, then I would see things being done this way, and that would create right or wrong. She had no ability to do that. It was literally, no, God says so. That's why. It was like the worst example of like what a Christian person can be to me.
Well, I think that there's in every freshman philosophy class, there's a moron. Or I had two. One of the morons was loud morons. One of the morons was the guy who brought up. He called himself a postmodernist, and every single class he was talking about how the table, we can't know that this table actually exists because we can't know. And it was and then there was the other guy. Every time he was so fixated on the concept of the soul, and his only example was Frankenstein's monster. And I was like, there are always loud idiots in philosophy classes, and that just made me think it's just a different type. There are always a different type of loud idiot in every philosophical.
So you know what you say to that guy is like, we can't be sure this table is here.
Hit him with it.
No, just why does it matter?
Right.
I'm going to act as if the table is here because it makes life easier.
It's like we also like the Vatican has a astrophysics department. And a lot of like really advanced scientific research comes out of the Vatican's astrophysics department. So it's not, necessarily like belief in God or belief that God is the source of.
I didn't try to say that at all.
No. I'm just sort of elaborating on the idea that like, yes, you can believe that God is the source of, right and wrong without necessarily letting it affect the idea that your worldview can be changed based on evidence.
So to bring it back to what Cam was saying, I couldn't even possibly begin to understand who thinks that philosophy is a cohesive, like one cohesive worldview when there's so many different like aspects of philosophy. Like, by the way, are you an Aristotelian or
I just think that the most important aspect of philosophy comes down to humility. And that's just kind of where I always land in conversations about philosophy is like, I don't have bad conversations anymore because I don't have conversations about it with egotistical buttholes. But it's one of the things that I think is missing from kind of the current discussion of these things is the Socratic idea of all that I know is that I know nothing. Is starting from the fact that I don't know, and I'll never all know, which I think can be summed up as the only positive of postmodernism.
Well, also that you have the freedom to entertain ideas without necessarily accepting them as truths. And that's a really important way of expanding your perception of reality, because there are a lot of people that like if they're going to entertain an idea whatsoever, they have to accept it as a truth. And they don't allow themselves the freedom to wander around in wrong ideas.
Well, and that's the basis of that girl in my intro philosophy class. She had to dabble. She'd have to think that was capable of being true, and it's not, because the only truth is the one God gave me. Like,
right.
That was it.
Well, one of the good things, like I did have my ethics professor was a very Christian man, but his whole thing was what, God bless, my brain just completely farted. This is happening more and more. Maybe I need to not eat hot foods at the beginning of stuff.
I saw you struggling.
You need to take like harder psychedelics before.
Need it. Give me the mushrooms.
Trip harder.
Yeah.
But what were you what were you saying about the girl? Because I had a point about that professor.
The initial thought was, I mean, well, the point of that girl is like to entertain the idea of different ethical theories, she'd have to believe that they're capable of being true, and that she's not capable of that because only truth is what God says is true.
Oh, okay, that's what it was. Is there his point of view, which left the garden open for exploring, was that all truth is God's truth, and so that regardless of what truth you come about, that you can explore it, and it is not dependent. In like, if an atheist says something true, then it's simply true because all of the truth coalesces into the absolute, if that makes sense.
Right. It seems to me like she believed that what her beliefs were true, and not necessarily that they were true because of God. They were true because she believed them to be true. And then she used God to sort of solidify, no, everything I believe is true because I said that God said it. And, you know, that's kind of a prideful, shameful kind of way to observe the world, that everything you believe is true because you say that God said so.
She was American, so I guess prideful and shameful go hand in hand there.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, my only point is that is a healthy view from the Christian perspective, is that when you come across truth, it's truth regardless of where it came from. To say it simply.
I guess, and once again, it all kind of boils down what is truth. You're talking like little t truth, big T truth. I'd say big T truth exists, but you probably can't see it. Little t truth, there's a million of them, and they're shaded by everything.
All I know is that all of my truth currently comes from Dr. Anthony Fauci.
Oh dear.
It's gonna be a sad life for you, bro.
Dr. Bowl of Cigarettes.
So when it comes to ethics, you know, there are different schools. You know, there's deontological ethics, duty bound. There's utilitarian, which, you know, I'm sure I hate it as much as I do because I don't fully understand it, or it's been explained to me improperly or used improperly around me. But the end justifies the means has never been something that I've been like, oh yeah, totally.
I mean, the end justifies the means to who?
Yeah. There's so many ends that people say, like, oh, well, this many people, it was okay for this many people to die or to lose their jobs or to be enslaved.
What if one of them was going to be the guy who cures cancer?
Right.
Yeah.
I think those other 10,000 people should have died.
That's why that the ends justify the means utilitarianism makes very little sense to me, because there's no way to know if the ends actually did justify the means. And I don't think it's... Do you think it's possible to reach good through doing evil? And don't try to define evil. I just mean the conception of evil. Do you think it's possible to do good utilizing what we would describe as not good?
Well, I think it's pretty evil to shoot somebody in the face. But if they're gonna slit my kid's throat, I'm probably gonna shoot him in the face, and I'm gonna consider that a great thing that I did for my child. And since that child is closer to my sphere of influence, I will probably assume that it's a better thing to do than not.
Maybe if we can parse this down from a shooting in the face example, which is kind of extreme. I remember my geography teacher in college showing us an image of a woman cutting down the last tree in an ancient forest. The forest had been basically deforested, and there's a woman cutting down the last tree in the last forest. And he kind of showed us this and was like, what a bitch, right? And we're all kind of like, yeah, that sucks, cutting down the last tree. He's like, yeah, but she's got kids to feed at home. She's got to light a fire. She's got to cook them food. So should her children die so the last tree in the last forest can remain? Like, are you going to let your children starve?
Do you think that is a less extreme thing? Like, I was just shooting a dude in the face. Like, you started from the world is over, and this is the last tree in the last. That seems way more extreme.
Maybe so. But okay, so like, but I don't know. It's like less of a bloody example, I guess. I don't know. Like
So-
it just did seem less intense.
This comes to why I'm a philosopher, because I would the answer to all of the questions is it depends who you are. It depends on your perception in that situation.
Okay, so one example that people have used in the past is abolitionist John Brown. Some people really dig the guy. Some people really hate him because he drug out, I think he was in Kansas. He drug out some people who were pro-slavery slave state, but didn't own slaves, and cut their throats in order to try to start a war to end slavery. And so in my mind, the killing of what amount to innocent people in order to start a war, that war did sort of happen in that way. What percentage of the population, like a huge percentage of the population, was that act of murdering people who have done nothing wrong a good if it had turned out to end slavery overall? Is it okay to kill the innocent in order to serve a greater purpose?
I mean, that depends on what your ethical theory is that you're basing it on.
Is that like the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few kind of thing?
What would your personal opinion on that be?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Slavery would end when it ended anyways. Murder is murder.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's where I land with these things. Like, I don't think so. And that's an argument I had a couple years ago where I had said some.
No. What if I believe that people of different skin color don't have souls?
I would have questions.
What are you doing with that belief? If you're just sitting there on your own in the middle of the woods,
but if I shoot
you're
people
not actually hurting.
But if I shoot people in the face that don't look like me and I don't believe they have souls, I'm not doing anything wrong at all.
That was one of my professors, that specific professor, Dr. Joseph Davis. His statement was not philosophy. Morality that begins with me must logically and necessarily end with me. So having that personal set of very, what's the word? Relative morality, like that is not actually morality.
I mean, it's the same thing as if you derive it from what God said, or however you arrive at morality is how you arrive at morality. That's the people who say, like, "Oh my God, every atheist out there is a murderer in waiting. What stops you from killing people if you don't have God?" Well, in the words of Penn Jillette, I kill as many people as I want to kill. I rape as many people as I want to rape, and that number is 0.
Well, also the belief in God has not necessarily stopped people from being murderers and rapists either.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, you can have the philosophy that murder is wrong and then still do it because, like, philosophy is just that. It's like a mental exercise. It doesn't always necessarily bear out in your reality. Like, you're still sort of operating based on your instincts, your needs, your hungers, your desires, and philosophy may play a role into that decision making, but it's not a law. It's not a law. It's not an axiom. Mm-hmm. It doesn't control you.
Well, and once again, if your kids are starving, well, that the math changes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's like when people were talking about Harambe a few years ago. And it's like if there were 10,000 gorillas and they were close to extinct, and I had to shoot every single last one of those gorillas to save one of my children, I'd do it in a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm.
Am I doing wrong in that moment? Does it matter if I think I'm right?
Well, once again, it matters to nobody but you. Like, at the end of the day, you're the person that has to live with the guilt or the not guilt of what you did, or pay the consequences of it. You really don't want to eat dolphin.
I want to try dolphin. I want to try bottlenose dolphin one time in my life.
I don't think they actually eat dolphin. You know that when they say dolphin safe tuna, they say dolphin safe tuna. It's not that you're eating dolphin in there. the dolphins were killed in the getting of it.
I want a well-prepared dolphin because they're not endangered or anything. I want a well-prepared dolphin. I want to see what that meat's like.
I want you to go and watch the Slammin' Salmon right now. And watch Michael Clark Duncan punch a swordfish in the head.
I hate orcas. I will say that I watched a documentary the other day about how great white sharks are no longer considered the apex predators because apparently orcas will attack great white sharks now and eat their liver and let them, be beached on the beach, the sand. And I am so mad because I wanted great white sharks to win that battle.
Why?
They're so fucking cool, dude.
So interesting point to that. My zoology teacher, in my zoology class, he showed us a video of a fox chasing a rabbit. And very quickly within the class, there developed two teams, Team Rabbit and Team Fox. And there were people who really wanted the rabbit to escape and people who really wanted the fox to get his meal. And so, there was like a football stadium level of cheering going on for this rabbit and this fox. And I think the rabbit did eventually get away, which is great because I was Team Rabbit. But when he shut the video off, he told us what just happened in here happens every single class, every time he shows that video, that teams develop between Team Rabbit and Team Fox.
So are you Team Orca or Team Great White Shark?
Oh, I'm Team Orca all the way.
Really?
I think sharks are stupid.
Well, but that's the thing. They are stupid and they're mindless killing machines, and I love that. But it's like orcas are really smart. So they're like
I find that boring.
But they're the cats of the sea, so they're like really evil at the same time. Like they'll just fucking slap penguins into the air and kill them slowly, or rip. What they'll do is they'll grab the penguin, and they'll shake it until its skin comes off, and the rest of the penguin flies out. They're like the most. They're almost evil in the way they do things, and so I'm like,
I wish my daughter.
Sharks are just trying to eat.
You can totally eat dolphin. Lots of cultures do, but because they're near the top of the food chain, they collect a lot of mercury. And so they're considered poison, not because you couldn't eat their meat in like a whatever kind of world, but they eat a lot of other fish. And so I guess a lot of mercury collects up in their bodies.
I just want to do
so
it
you
once.
Wouldn't want to eat it for that reason. But yeah, if you weren't making a diet out of it.
I'm just saying I can't talk about ocean creatures without thinking about good old John and sex with whales.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. God bless him wherever he is. The great the whale whorehouse in the sky.
Here's the thing. I don't think we've talked about this on the show, but like there are a lot of people like if I were to get on Twitter and I were to say, if anyone ever tells you that I killed myself, I didn't, don't believe them, that could very well be a troll from me. Like I would maybe do that and then kill myself just to make people have that kind of conspiratorial conversation after. I think that John McAfee most likely did kill himself when he found out he was coming to the United States criminal justice system, because he saw Assange isn't even in the U.S. justice system right now, and his defense was, if I go there, I will probably kill myself. And then you see what's happened to Ross Ulbricht. You've seen how Snowden's had to run away. And I'm just like, I absolutely see a case that John McAfee did, in fact, kill himself because he didn't want to go to the United States prison system.
I hope it was even more simple than that. I hope he's just that dedicated to the troll.
I know. Like that. I mean, if you're in that situation.
This is the fucking right moment for me to do this, Janice. I'm going to do it.
Right. And that would be like, it's like, I got this from Malice, but I very much like when I get to the point where whatever social media is out there, by the time I'm getting closer to death, I'm going to start. I have like several tweets scheduled for time after I'm dead, so that when I die, every now and then people will get tweets from me, and it'll just confuse the shit out of them.
Good to know.
So you will hear me after I'm dead, just so you're aware.
What do you
Good to know.
how are you being like taken care of when you're dead?
How do you mean?
Well, you know,
Interment. How are you being interred?
Buried, cremated. What's your plan?
Well, until I have land, it's going to be probably cremation. But once I have land, I want to be wrapped in linen and planted in the land. Headstone, sure, but I want it to be kind of ancestral land. That's my goal.
Okay. I want to be eaten.
Of course you do. Jessica probably wants to be eaten too.
In what regard? Like eaten by worms or eaten by humans?
Nope. I want to be cremated, the ashes baked into loaves of bread, and then served at my send off.
You know, it would be
that way I would literally get to live on through all of my people.
What would be really cool would be, I think we mentioned that on the death episode, but to be put into gunpowder for bullets. That would be a pretty cool way to do it.
Be an interesting one.
Wow.
But I mean, like there are a lot of ways to die. I know Jessica wants her.
You could add me to the spermicide on condoms. That'd be kind of cool too.
There was one lady that
so many great ideas
I knew of years ago whose son passed away, and after her son passed away, she had the urn, and she would literally take it and she would put it into her coffee. She would put it into she would mix it into her food when she was making food. She was literally eating her son and probably 9 other people that were in that incinerator. But that's a thing that happens. People in their grief will eat the ashes of their deceased. They're reposed.
I think it was in African tribes where I got the idea from initially.
I am revolted right now.
Salt shaker, but it's just my ashes. That's a good one, Paul.
Thanks, Paul. That's a good one. just if someone's got to do it catchy, it's got to be like one of those like spice packets.
So one thing I've thought of, and I don't think it's possible, but there is a museum where if they can get them, they will cut the skin off of tattooed people and tan it so that they can keep those art pieces forever.
It's expensive.
I think that would be cool, but really all I want, and my wife says she wants it too, so I don't know if this is good or bad, but I would love to bury
I'm just imagining his wife
skull,
wearing him around after he's dead. Just like going to the store.
My skull. I would like to. I feel like human skulls are fascinating things.
Yeah.
If I could have an actual human skull, and I would treat it respectfully. Obviously, I'm not going to go
shoving it up his ass.
Not Ed Gein or whatever.
Good luck.
But like that is such a cool thing. I would love to be able to. Like Del Close, I think his name was. I don't know if it was Second City or a different improv group, but he ran that. And when he died, he said he wanted his skull to be saved and given to a local theater that they could use as Yorick in Hamlet. And that's also cool.
Who the fuck's this Yorick guy? Come on.
So
to be or not to be.
In the monastery, and the Orthodox monastery on Mount Athos, the monks have their skulls. Basically, after 5 years, they disinter you, and then they take your skull out. They deglove it or whatever needs to be removed off of it, and then they imprint who the monk was onto the skull.
That's
and then
so
they
cool
have an ossuary where the monks' skulls are all there. And during a tour, a 60 minutes tour. Of the Mount Athos monastery, the monk had said, "These are my future roommates." And so he knew, eventually his own skull, memento mori, what I am, one day you will become. You sort of know that one day your skull will be among the rest of the monk's skulls. was like, there's kind of a comfort to that. Like, I don't know. I liked the idea.
Do you really want to be eaten, or do you have another plan?
Me?
Yeah.
No, that's what I want. Like 100%. I don't think it's gonna happen, but like Liz knows that is the end objective that I want. She's a good baker. I'd trust her. She'd find a way to make it work. I personally recommend cinnamon. People put me in some cinnamon buns.
Yeah, I mean,
covered in enough cream cheese frosting. Who the fuck cares what it tastes like?
You fry anything, I'll eat it.
I mean, most of what we get in our food isn't actually like flour, anyways. It's all wood.
Yeah. So some of it's bone too. Yeah.
So we're at about an hour 40 at this point. So we should probably start winding it down because a lot of people are just going to drop off. People probably already have. But
I mean, I'll be honest. I'm not the late night bug I used to be. I'm starting to drop off myself.
I saw that. So let me ask you the seminal question, which actually I'm going to bring back a question real quick, just to
don't you
Jessica.
Do that?
If you were to order a pizza right now, what pizza would you order? And Jessica is not going to look up an astrology. She's going to make a genuine reading on that pizza.
If I were to order a pizza right now, I mean, I'm going to go barbecue chicken pizza.
Ooh, with the red onion?
Red onion, barbecue sauce, cheddar cheese. Personally, I prefer it if it's got the crispy chicken, not the baked chicken or whatever it is there.
I see you are also a man of culture.
So what does it mean? What does it tell you about
it? Just means that he's a man of culture. Yeah. The buffalo chicken pizza, or not buffalo chicken pizza, the barbecue chicken pizza is the ultimate pizza. That is like the number one pizza.
I'd say buffalo chicken pizza, but nobody makes it right. So
it's very hard to get a good one. You are absolutely right about that.
When they put ranch on it, it ruins it for me. Personally, I want a garlic sauce with blue cheese on it, but that's because I'm from Buffalo area. So
yeah, I agree. I actually 100% agree with the ranch thing. 100%.
Well, I do like ranch on wings, but I also like blue cheese on wings. I like both.
I like ranch on pizza.
I'm like bi when it comes to dressing. And
the problem is when you drop a cream ingredient onto something that's very hot, it spoils it. It makes it go rancid. And so oftentimes when they're putting,
I'm just talking purely about wings.
In general, wings.
I don't want a buffalo chicken pizza. I've never had one that tasted good.
Yeah, I've had them that tasted good, but it's very few and far between. Like most places don't do them right.
Well, it's like one of my favorite subs is a buffalo chicken sub, and I don't think I've had one. The last great one I had was over 20 years ago. So
at this point in my life, I only like my own cooking. Like restaurant food has gotten so terrible that I pretty much only like my own cooking.
I get that, especially when it comes to steak. I can make a steak better than any. Of course, I haven't gone to Ruth's Chris or anything like that, but I can make a steak better than any of these fools.
See, I've been to Ruth's Chris. It's gone downhill. These places used to be good. They're not good anymore.
I wonder if it's that they're not good anymore. We just got so much better at it.
Well, see, you guys have an interesting way of looking at this. See, I just don't like food. I find the foods that I'm willing to eat smaller and smaller. I've actually signed up for one of those like box meal things. Like, drop me off a box of my meals for the week, and I'm going to eat them. And because number one, I need to get the weight under control, and number two, I realized that I just feel super weird about food. I don't know what I like. I don't know what I like anymore. So literally, I just want to eat Starburst jelly beans and pizza.
I feel you because it's crazy because in the last several years I've just been like extremely uninspired by food.
Yeah,
like I don't even care that much about it.
What am I hearing right now?
But unless it's steak, I will.
Did you see those T-bones that I prepared last Wednesday? Did you see them?
I saw them, but do you salt them while they're getting to temperature?
No.
See, she said steak, and I don't like steak, so
salt them when they're getting to room temperature because it'll soak all through the whole thing. Game changer.
You make a shrimp scampi instead.
So no, you hold on. I thought you were saying salt them like while they're cooking. I salt them while they're sitting there while this meat is coming up to room temperature. So yes, that's I do that. That's the proper way to season a steak.
Most people don't know how to do it, and it's frustrating.
Oh my god! Do you guys watch?
Do
you guys watch Letterkenny at all?
Mm-mm.
Yes.
There's a great bit about steaks, which is literally all four of them bitching about how you properly prepare a steak. The one guy's, you better nothing but salt and pepper for me. Well, those good farmers up in Alberta wouldn't even bother sending these steaks here if they knew you're going to be fucking them up with salt and pepper.
This is not a postmodernism thing. There is a proper way to do a steak, and if you do it wrong, you deserve to die.
Okay, well, just for the record, I'm going to burn the shit out of it, and that's the only way I'm going to be able to choke it down.
We're at war. You and we're at war now. Generations of our families will fight to the death over this. I hope you understand. Hatfield and McCoy.
My good buddy Gonzo, he invited me and some people over a couple of weeks ago. And do you guys know what's his name there? Quincy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, me and Quincy went and partied with my buddy Gonzo a couple of weeks ago up here.
Nice.
It was a fun night. It's good people.
I love Quincy. He's the best. He loves fat girls. I love him.
Does. Sure does. So we're up there and Gonzo's making steaks, and I didn't have the heart to tell him, like, I really don't like meat a whole bunch. Like, it's not really my thing. But he made these gigantic steaks, and I did my best. Like, he cooked it like literally rare.
So listen,
give me the knife, bro. I'll be like, I'm not gonna tell someone who's cooking me steak like, nah, fuck you, bro. I'm too good for this shit. But it's like, I really don't like steak. But if you get steak, and I'd eat it. No, not at all.
That's so hard to hear.
I don't like meat in general.
I don't like meat in general. But if it's a well done steak, and I don't mean well done by temperature, I mean a properly prepared steak is
with
next
ketchup.
to. Okay, now I'm at war with Cam.
I'm just messing with you.
I will battle all of you.
No, just you have to go. You have to go and watch this Letterkenny bit. It's just like a minute and a half long. But the one guy, Squirrely Dan's on there. He's like, yeah, it's like honestly, you guys are fucking it all up by ever letting it touch a grill. Sear it on both sides. Put it in the oven. It's gonna be drier than a fart otherwise. I mean, maybe I should say a nice herbs and garlic, mix over top of it. You're fucking up, Squirrel's like, yeah, me and Gordon Ramsay are both fucking idiots.
You reverse sear with butter. I hate you all.
Reverse sear with
you
butter.
need to get a sous vide.
Mm-hmm. I know. They're really expensive, though.
They're not. I mean, mine was given to me, but they're not that expensive anymore. I have a little mini one. I think it was maybe $80.
$80
which right now for me is expensive, but that's neither here nor there.
Considering the amount of money I just spent on a canning pot, that sounds like just a joy to spend.
I will send you the one I have, Jessica. I will, and I'm not going to buy you one. I'll send you a link.
Okay, I was like, don't send me a sous vide. I'll feel bad. Like I have to get you something nice.
I mean, you should get me nice things. I'm a very lovely boy. But let's go to
that's not how gifting works. You accept the gift and you just enjoy that.
Yeah,
and just enjoy it. See,
I mean, I know that psychologically you're not set up to do that. Like you're actually set up to give gift for gift, but you can be above that. You don't have to give in to the animal inside you.
There's a thing. There's a gender dynamic here too. As a lady, I can't accept gifts without like being reciprocal, or I feel like something's expected of me.
Oh, I'm
gonna be honest. That sounds like
everyone who sends me.
I was gonna say that sounds like you ain't much of a lady. Well, you just walk around sucking dicks. Every guy comes on.
No, that's the point. I don't walk around sucking dicks because I am reciprocal with gift giving. If you give me a gift, I'm going to give you a gift back.
I mean, because I don't want you. I wanted. I'm just saying.
To believe exactly the point. Exactly the point. Yeah.
So let me ask you before we tie this on a bow and let you go to sleep. What right now gives you hope? What motivates you to carry on? Could be your beautiful daughter, your beautiful wife, could be anything. But like, is there anything that would be helpful to the sad people out there?
Well, I've done this a couple other places, and they don't take it for much of a white pill, but go and read the book Man's Search for Meaning. And at the end of the day, think about this. We got used to the Patriot Act. My kid will get used to whatever the COVID Act is going to be. And human beings are incredibly resilient. So even if we do get shipped into concentration camps, we'll find a way to find meaning in life and kind of make the best of it.
Sucks.
Well, it sucks that you're psychologically amazing and can like make the worst circumstances tolerable. No,
I'm just I agree with your major point. That's what that whole movie Life is Beautiful was about how they sent these people to the concentration camp, and the guy was able to make his son believe that it was a fun game the entire time that he was there. And so he made his son believe that the prize that he would get if he won the game was a tank. And at the very end of the movie, you see the American tanks rolling down the street, coming to free them. And this little boy is over the moon shouting, I won, and as these tanks roll toward him.
What about the boy in the striped pajamas? That movie didn't end quite the same.
No, it didn't. No, it sure didn't. But I get your general point. I agree with your general point. But the idea that we'll all be shipped off to concentration camps sucks.
Well, we're not in Australia, so we're okay.
For now.
For a few more weeks.
For a few more weeks, yeah. Though you got those people, they just burnt down a COVID testing center. So, things are getting pretty groovy over there.
I talk to Australians regularly at this point in my life, and it is a white pill for me to hear them, the ones who would have considered themselves progressive or liberal in American terms or moderate, are all talking about how done they are with all of this, how they're just going to stop. They're not going to do these things. It may be all talk for some of these people, but it's still good to hear.
Well, Cam, both me and Jessica were progressives at one point in time.
Mm-hmm.
It's true. Well, that's what I'm saying. This is
eventually you wake up.
Pill. And I'm hoping that's what this is. But is there anything else you'd like to share with the old audience before we go? I'll let them know where to find you in just a sec.
Well, if you wanted to see my wife just dunk on me constantly and be smarter than me, come over to Misfit Family, 3 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube or Facebook, and we're talking about books and stuff because we're nerds like that.
Awesome.
And all of the stuff that you do is at Nick. You can link to it through nickpecone.com, correct?
Yep.
Awesome.
This coming Sunday, and you guys will appreciate this, we're going over the book The Act of Marriage.
Oh.
Okay.
Which was a sex positive marriage book written by the dude who went on to write the Left Behind books.
So was it Tim LaHaye or Jerry B. Jenkins?
Tim LaHaye.
Dude.
So,
I read all of those books.
By the way, me and my wife were talking. The whole idea is to go over like self-help books and like family books and
Are you
books
going to read The Joy of Sex?
And she didn't bring up who wrote this book. I don't even honestly think she knew who wrote this book. But like I'm listening to some, man, this thing is just wild. Like I can't believe this book even exists. And I look up who wrote it. I'm like, oh, there we go.
Can I make a suggestion for your book list?
You can. I've got the next 3 seasons all planned out, but we'll see how it goes. Maybe move something.
So there's a book by a guy named Jack Douglas, and it's called The Jewish, Japanese, Sex, and Cookbook and How to Raise Wolves.
I'm going to read that just for the hell of reading that. Please send me a link so I can remember it.
Phenomenal title.
I forgot everything that was in that already. It's so wild.
The Jewish, Japanese, Sex, and Cookbook and How to Raise Wolves.
Sounds like a fun family.
Yeah.
Sounds like a misfit family.
And it is listed as a self-help book. So I haven't read it yet, but I want to.
Well, go read. I'm just guessing. I wonder if it's anything like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, which has nothing to do with either Zen or motorcycle maintenance.
Right, yeah. I remember reading that, like, what is this book? Yeah.
That book had me going crazy for a couple of weeks, honestly.
Really?
Like some of the themes in it, like really had me upset. I'll just say.
I'll have to read it then. I'll probably love it.
It's a recommend.
That's about a philosopher thinking about philosophy.
Oh no, I'll hate that.
It's very very real world in perspective. Like it's like a legit. Yeah, I'd be interested what you actually think about that.
Let us never do a philosophy episode again. I don't understand them.
You know what you should do is that you're getting everybody together for like a end of the horror thing show, right? Like we have to get together and talk. With anyone else. Do we get like trophies for if we actually stick it out?
So if you do all of it, which it seems like you might, because you're coming pretty close.
I'm going to be honest. I plan on doing it all, so I don't ever have to do it again. Because I will not lie, there is definitely an emotional toll to doing it.
Yes, this is what I've tried to tell people. It's not easy. You think, I can watch a movie at night for 100 days. Of course I could do that. You think that, but when it's horror movies, there's a different element to it. So I'm glad to see that acknowledged.
And there's, I've approached this differently because I'm the first. Like I immediately threw out the list and said, "Nah, it's not for me. I've seen all that shit before.
It's fine."
So I started my own list, which I've been sharing in the group of all of the movies I watched that are none of the movies you guys have watched yet.
That's fine.
I'm surprised how far I've gotten without coming across anything. I was really interested in that one possum that you guys posted, so I might actually break and have to watch one or two that you guys have on your list. But
I'm really pleased that Ryan liked Perfect Host so much because he's very critical. So he
liked Tucker and Dale versus Evil so much.
Really? Okay, that's actually
that's casting. There is nothing funnier than Tyler Labine and fucking what's his name there, Wash.
Alan Tudyk.
Yeah, he's Wash to me, but
yeah,
always gonna be Wash. Those two are just fucking gems together. But I'm very disappointed at anyone who will talk shit on fucking Mandy, which is perhaps the greatest movie ever made. How does Nicolas Cage as a lumberjack avenging his dead girlfriend against a cult leader with demon bikers hopped up on super acid not sound like the greatest movie ever made?
It's real hit or miss with Nicolas Cage.
That sentence alone makes that movie
watched
great.
It today.
Super. But honestly, as far as movies go, Beyond the Black Rainbow is probably a more interesting movie, but it's not as much fun. But he also didn't like The Color Out of Space either, Ryan didn't, and that was disappointing.
No, I didn't. I thought that movie was disappointing too.
That movie was perhaps the best adaptation of a Lovecraft story ever because they're impossible to adapt into film.
You and Gwen would agree on that score. Gwen is the other sort of like founder of the challenge. And I don't know if you've noticed her kind of like making commentary here and there about movies, but she had the same take on Color Out of Space. Is that it's very hard to adapt Lovecraft movies, and that was a well done one.
Part of the whole idea of Lovecraft is he creates a disembodied horror that you can't. Everything in it is designed to be indescribable, so as to make your brain imagine something that's not possible. Everything is contradictions and contortions of reality, and like bending it back in on itself. And I've never seen anything come close to kind of like really pulling it off in like a film sense, because film is such a visual medium, and you got to make the film lie to you. Like, I also respect anyone that'll pull out some serious Cronenberg shit, like with the mom and the boy is one of the most awful things I've ever seen in a film. Period. Yeah. Like that shit's hard to watch, on like a lot of levels.
All of them.
But beyond that, like, just it's such an interesting fucking movie. Like, so wild.
Yeah, the most difficult one for me, I think, on the list would be the Von Trier movie, Antichrist.
So you guys have built this up. Like, I don't know that I can watch it.
It's I cannot oversell that fact that I'm warning you. Like, I cannot oversell that fact.
Like,
you've been warned. If you choose to watch that movie, that's on you.
Well, I put it this way. I'm going to end up having to buy the movie to make that thing. Because you're never ever going to want to play it again once you see it. Well, no, that's the thing. Like, there's so many different ways this can go. It's either I'm going to get it and I'm going to be like, really, this is what that big deal was about? Or I'm going to watch it and be like, it was pretty awful. Or there's always the, man, I feel like I'm an awful human being for enjoying that as much as I did.
Well, my husband was infuriated. Someone showed us that movie and he was infuriated at that person and didn't talk to him for months because of it. Like, he was upset by what he saw in that film. So I don't know. I mean, like, I don't know what your level is either. For me, it was like pretty shocking. I was really grossed out.
You've watched The Faces of Death, right?
Like the meth thing?
No. Faces of Death was a videotape that showed real and fake deaths. The real test was Rotten.com back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen stuff on that. Yeah. I mean, it's bad, but like,
oh boy, you don't realize the fragility of the human experience until you see a man ripped apart by a helicopter.
Oh god.
How about, you ever seen where the guy uses a impact driver and drives a nut onto his finger and it peels like a banana?
Nope.
God, why? Why?
Well, that was actually at work telling you why not to fuck around with your tools, to be completely honest. It's a good lesson to learn.
You ever see that show, How It's Made? They would have these like industrial machines where little things were going through and little chops and all this kind of thing. Every machine they showed me, I would imagine what would happen to a human body that got tossed into it. So there's like some part of my brain that is like, what would happen to an arm? Like if it ended up in this machine.
Like, see, I'm trying to imagine this movie. It's the thing, like, my brain is now hyping this thing up in like such a weird way that it's like, I don't know. I'm probably just gonna be let down by like how insane my mind is making it out to be.
You might be. You might be. I don't know.
There is a thing where, like, because I don't necessarily carry all of the Christian baggage around with me, that could affect my thoughts on it. Or totally not. And I scare the shit out of myself for no fucking reason.
There are psychological elements to that movie and why it's so difficult to watch. So that might be true. And I think that's what makes Asian horror so interesting, because a lot of it is not informed by Christianity. Christianity is such a part of the Western culture that a lot of it makes its way into our horror movies, whether we realize it or not.
Oh, no, absolutely.
And movies that come out of Asia don't have that element to them, which makes them very innovative.
We have to also separate different places in Asia, because one of the adventures that I've been on in my year in going through horror is watching a lot of foreign films, because those are the ones I haven't seen so far, and Netflix has a lot of them. And China as a whole makes fucking terrible horror movies. They're all literally the same movie. They have the weirdest take on ghosts imaginable, and none of it's really scary. Like, it's kind of like a shitty facsimile of The Ring over and over again.
Yeah, so I'm thinking of most of the Asian horror movies I've seen have come from Korea, namely South Korea.
Those are very different.
Right. Those are very different because they're like culturally they're very different than we are. They don't have that Judeo-Christian sort of like ethic being played upon.
There's been some of the more interesting ones I've watched have been like some of the, it looks like they come from Eastern Europe.
Like a Serbian film?
I've watched some Serbian films. Those are also interesting in different ways.
No. I'm talking about the movie A Serbian Film.
I've never heard of it.
Well, it's one that I haven't seen and I won't watch because the stuff that they put into that movie is so horrifying that there's not a chance I would ever look it up.
So, and this is what shades this Antichrist movie. Have you ever watched the Masters of Horror series?
I don't think so.
In particular, there's an episode by, oh God.
Yeah, Jessica.
What?
She just read it.
I just read it. Like, just read what's in a Serbian film.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to look it up.
I'm gonna skip that one. I think I'm gonna skip it.
Well, so there's one of the Masters of Horror was a series on like Cinemax, I think, and they did like 1 hour horror movies done by people. What's his name? Who did? It's killing me. I can't remember his name. It's got the one dude from Walking Dead who did. He plays the cool guy that everybody likes.
Norman Reedus.
Yes, Norman Reedus is like the main character in it, and he plays a guy who's like girlfriend, and he was like they're junkies together, and like their obsession was film, and he's spending the movie looking for this. Someone hires him to find a thing called La Fin du Monde, which is the last moment on Earth, whatever. And the premise behind this fictional movie that they're looking for in the story is that it's only ever played once. And the place that was filmed burned down, and most of the people died because of how awful the movie was. And like when you get to the end of it, like you find out why the movie like had such a potent evil in it, and it was the director. It was literally just the filming of an angel's wings being cut off, and so like that act imbued like any copy of this. Like that existed to just have basically you'd watch it, kill yourself in the most gruesome of ways because you couldn't live having seen that. Like the idea of disfiguring an angel being so horrifying an act that you couldn't go on.
Right. And Quest just brought up, like Dogma. And I'm like, yeah, in Dogma, like we saw that. Like,
no, but this is so first, like it's all about tone. Like this is genuinely, it's John Carpenter. That's right. John Carpenter directed it.
Okay.
But it's not the idea of the angel. It's the idea of going after like this movie or this film that the act itself would imbue any copy of it with power like this because of how gruesome the act would be. I mean, the angel in the story is, I mean, it's not done in a campy fun sort of way. Like it's
right.
This is a very otherworldly creature. It's not meant to look human hardly at all. Mm-hmm. And it's a pretty gruesome thing. Like and you don't ever really see until the very, very end like what the hell's going on. It's just you just see cigarette burns like periodically throughout it, and when people are losing their mind, the closer he gets to finding it, the more insane shit gets. And I think ultimately he ends up killing himself at the end of it. But and then this is that's what I come back to every time I think about watching Antichrist, is that like basically I'm putting myself in the position of that character when I think about it, just chasing after something that's so awful.
With Antichrist, the one thing that I will give it toward the positive is that photographically, it's one of the most beautiful movies I've ever seen, to be honest. Like, it's actually very beautifully shot. And I think because it's so well done that when the elements of it that are frightening happen, you're really there. They really like take you there. So I mean, I don't know. I still think you should see it at this point. Now I'm just like, I want to know what you think.
And what's, because I actually read some reviews and stuff on like when it came out at Cannes and like what people had to say about it. I've looked at the score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it's kind of in a place like, I don't know, how is this going to go? Like anything that's like has like a 63% rating means enough people have like reviewed it to like have opinions on it. I'm like, well, I mean,
yeah,
I've watched some pretty hard dark shit in my day.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I mean, if you've watched a lot of hardcore dark stuff, it's probably not gonna like hit you like that.
I mean, you see that little guy behind me, right?
I mean, I don't know. I have bad vision.
It's
an 18-inch model of Pinhead from Hellraiser.
Yeah, right. I don't know. I mean, just if it ends up really upsetting you, just don't be mad at me. That's all.
Oh no, I'll totally be extra mad at you.
Okay, cool, good. I'm glad we're agreed.
For allowing a woman to have that kind of control over my emotions.
All right.
All right. So beyond the that was out after we said something about your show. Beyond that, if you want to see Nick tweet never, follow him at Nicky Pinecone on Twitter.
Yeah, if you do cool stuff, I'll follow you and be like, oh, what an asshole. Because that's generally what I think of everybody on Twitter. That's what genuinely everyone's doing on Twitter, is just being an asshole. So
that's what I'm doing.
I don't know that I feel bad about it. I feel like I'm giving people exactly what they want by going, God, you asshole.
So
I'm not there to be a good person.
I am. I'm there to be a good person who says terrible things to terrible people.
I just can't help being who I am, folks.
So with that, let's draw this to a close. Is there anything else you want to share with the audience before I let you go and we rattle off our bullshit?
No, I'm good, boss.
All right. Thank you for coming back on and talking about all sorts of things. Rest well and dream of large women.
We can do that.
Baby dubs.
All right. So with that, to all who stayed in the live feed this long, thank you. That was a marathon, and I'm proud of you. But beyond that, we have a couple things. One, next week, my mom's going to be on the show, and it's going to be a timely episode about abortion. Should be tons of fun. Following that, we have Monica and Brad from the Propaganda Report coming back on together right after September 11th. Who knows what we'll talk about? Should be fun. After that, we're going to do a Jim Jones episode with the Odd Man from the Oddcast. And finally, your favorite British person who's ever been, the only British person who's ever been on this show, Kate Sherrill, is going to be coming back to talk to us about what was it again? Not supernaturalism. What's the term? Spiritualism. Back in the Gothic age.
The 1900s stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I grew up near Lilydale.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. But beyond that, if you would like to support us, I wish you would. It would be great if you did. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/themadOnes. We have a couple of great sponsors. One, Run Your Mouth Coffee. Their bourbon barrel coffee is so good. You should try it. If you go to their website, rymcoffee.com, and use promo code TheMadOnes, you get 10% off there. Also, if you like dried meats, there's righteousfelon.com. Similar promo code, not the same, just Mad Ones on that one. And you could get some really badass, super hot beef jerky if that's what you're into. Beyond that, check us out. Check out our archives on rockfin.com/themadOnes. I'm on Twitter at Cam Harless. Jessica's on Twitter at SoupCanarchist. If you want a t-shirt, wearethemadOnes.com/store. If you erase the store part, you can listen directly to our show there or on any podcatcher that you like. We're also on YouTube. If you're here, you know that, /themadOnes. And then we're also on Odyssey as well. But beyond that, that's all I have for you. Anything you want to share with the good people, Miss Jessica?
Oh no, I'm out. I have nothing.
Awesome. And with that, go do something good this week. Be nice to someone. I don't know. Peace.